And now, the survival show that once survived, playing with its bag a little too much. In this episode, your buddy, former operator and privacy and security expert Just Carroll drops by. We deep dive on EDC. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 282. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Justin, welcome back to In the Rabbit Hole.
Aaron, what's going on, man?
Oh, you know, living the dream here on the interwebs, saying crazy stuff and doing fun and exciting things. So for people who are new here, you've been a guest on the show a whole bunch of times. You've gone interesting places and punched interesting people in the faces. I think that's how that expression goes. Not exactly, but we'll just play along with it. But I think, what is it? Your bio here, for those who are new, is... So
I guess my official bio starts when I joined the military. I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. I was a MARSOC operator when I left the Marine Corps. I worked for a couple of years for some other government agencies doing some not as sexy as it sounds stuff, running around with a rifle and a radio in some interesting places. Then I went to a U.S. military special operations school as a full-time equivalent instructor, and I left that job. I spent 5 years there, just about, and I left there about 5 years ago, and I've been working in the digital security, privacy space for my day job ever since, and blogging my face off and podcasting and all that good stuff.
Awesome, dude. So when it comes to today's topic of EDC, you've had a lot of different experiences with a lot of different scenarios, both military, other things, and then also as a civilian, just carrying junk around with you every day, and having that mindset. So I think, and y'all have also done to get into a little bit. You also have done a fair amount of, you and your co-host on your new show, Across the Peak, have done a fair amount of talking about this. So I thought, since we've been doing a lot of back to basics episodes, it would be fun to go back and revisit EDC, all the junk you carry with you every day. But to give a better definition of it, for me personally, I find EDC is a kit to handle whatever is likely, and then even some of the more extreme scenarios of what can happen to you in a day, but that's it. It's in the course of, it's just designed to get you through stuff that can happen in a 12 to 24 hour period, and that's it. It's not the kitchen sink. It's not gas masks. It's not other craziness. And it's, my other thing is that it should at least cover as many of the basic 8 survival categories as possible, without being some monstrosity that you wag around. What do you find any differences with the way that you think about, like, the basic idea of what EDC is, Justin?
So, well, I've had EDC items in my pocket since before I knew there was a term for EDC. Mm-hmm. Like, since I was probably in my early teens, I was like, okay, I like always having the same thing in the same place at all the time, always know where my pocket knife is and my wallet and whatever else. But when it comes to EDC bags, I think I just kind of started formalizing this concept in my head maybe 6 months ago. And we recorded that episode a few months ago, and that really got the gears turning. And I really kind of refined the system. And I think of it as, yes, there is some stuff in there that is solely for emergency use, solely for use in some sort of disaster or things go wrong in some way, major or minor. But I think more importantly for me, it contains a bunch of stuff that I'm going to use anyway on a daily basis, like my phone charger and my computer cable and, maybe a rain jacket that, it happens all the time up here in the Pacific Northwest that I might have to throw a rain jacket on. I guess here's what my EDC bag is not. It's not a break glass in case of emergency type capsule of stuff that I don't touch this unless something goes wrong. It's a bag I have my hands in every single day. The food in there is the snacks that I snack on a normal day and replenish, whatever I've taken out. And the water in there is my normal water bottles that I drink out of, that sort of that kind of mentality about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in almost every way, like we really align on those things. I know mine, to go back in time, mine was, I think my first EDC bag that went, I don't know, 12 years ago or whatever, when I really started to get more serious about things. I mean, I carried a pocket knife for the longest time, but that was, a pocket knife and a comb. And I think that was generally it, and a phone. And in some ways it's still my pocket EDC. And I think you made a great point about that is where EDC begins, is still pretty similar. A little more thought has gone into that. But in general, when I first began, I mean, my bag was much heavier. There was a lot more stuff in it. It was a much bigger bag, and it was a little tactically delicious, a lot more so than it is now. And I think that's something that as you spend more time with this and realize like, okay, I've got to drag this thing around every day. I don't need these super isolated, except for me. I have one thing that is like, there is only one purpose for this item, and that being a pistol. But the rest of it has to serve a pretty good purpose. What have you had that a similar evolution, or is it for you? Is it always been more of a rational take on what an EDC kit is?
No. So the first bag I ever put together was more of kind of like a bug out bag, go bag kind of thing that I'm like, I'm going to keep this in the car. I'm going to keep it on me. And it had all the standard, I guess, prepper, whatever stuff in it, like a sleeping bag and AR-15 magazines and MREs. And I don't even know, man. It was loaded to the brim. And I realized basically this thing's going to sit in my car for 20 years and never get touched if it stays like this. It's going to get unpacked, and I'm going to buy new shit to put in it. And that's pretty much going to be it. And then I moved on to carrying a backpack a lot, especially as I moved into an office environment. Basically, I just had a bag with a bunch of crap loose in it. And the one thing that has completely revolutionized how I think about this and how I deal with the problem of what do I put in an EDC bag is inception packing. Are you familiar with that?
No, I can't say that I am.
So it's basically the concept of having a bunch of bags inside your bigger bag.
Okay.
Basically I have, I think 7 or 8 maybe plug and play modules, like a first aid kit, a hygiene toiletry kit, an inclement weather clothing kit that, has a jacket and gloves and a hat, an electronics kit. So basically I zip open my backpack and I've got like 7 smaller bags inside there. I can pull out what I need. If I'm going on an overnight trip, I throw in the one that has a change of clothes in it. I throw in the toiletries and I'm good to go. That has completely changed how I think about this whole setup, man.
That to me makes a tremendous amount of sense. I know I've done that with my bug out bag. I haven't really thought to do that with my EDC bag, although I've gotten my EDC bag so small, I don't know that I could do that. But I mean, I need to put some thought into it now that you've mentioned it. Now you've got my wheels turning on that. That's pretty clever. So essentially, like, you've turned it into a modular system that is dynamic and can be situational, changed out for the situation at hand.
Yeah, I think I leave most of the stuff in there most of the time. So like my bag basically is, there's first aid kit, there's a toiletries kit, a electronic stuff, my inclement weather stuff, a change of clothing, and then like a little snack pack with my, candy bars and nuts and whatever. And then basically a backup wallet and a removable for flight bag that has sharps and a couple extra magazines and things like that. And most of that honestly stays in most of the time for me, just due to the frequency of my travel. And even when I'm here, I might have to go into Seattle, which is like 25 miles away. It can take a couple of hours. And, a lot of things can go wrong with that system. If one bridge goes out or is shut down for some reason, now you're looking at like 4 hours to get home, 5 hours maybe. So most of this, I think most of the stuff stays with me most of the time. The one thing that might come out sometimes is like the change of clothes. And then if I'm doing like international travel, obviously the remove before flight stuff will come out and maybe another change of clothes will go in. But yeah, really flexible modular system.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a really important point that you just made about items that are removed before flight, because I do know somebody that grabbed their EDC kit without thinking about it and went to go get on a plane and had forgotten their pistol. And yeah, they they didn't make that flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and they caused themselves some legal headaches. I mean, it wasn't super. It wasn't horrible, and I've heard some other airports are much worse about it. But I think one of the things that I heard was get a bright orange carabiner and stick it on the bag that you have a gun in, and just always try to be mindful of that orange carabiner if you're somebody who has to get on and off planes often. And I thought, any sort of a system that makes it identifiable to you, and of course not other people, that, hey, this bag is hot, so to speak. So,
yeah. So my remove before flight bag, it's a zippered bag, zipped up, nothing's going to come out of it, and it goes inside a little flat zippered compartment in my pack. And I actually bought a red remove before flight tag and put that onto the zipper pull, and I always leave that hanging out into the bag, and that. The pull lets me quickly see if it's there or not. And having that in a sealed bag, I really like that, because if let's say a 9mm round pops out of my magazine, it's still contained within that bag and not just floating loose in my backpack, where quite honestly, I'm probably not going to find it until the TSA informs me that it's there. So
yeah. That's pretty. So as a short rabbit hole, is that a pre-made product, or is that just you got a red tag and that's what that means to you?
No, so the bag itself is from Think Tank. I'll send you a link to that. And the tag itself, you can buy remove before flight tags on Amazon. It's this cloth tag that's about 4 inches long, it's red, and in white letters it says remove before flight.
Oh, that's really cool. I think I'm going to need to buy a few of those. That's really cool. To go back for pockets for a second, since that is where EDC really begins, what do you keep in your pocket? What do you keep on your person? Because that might be a little easier to more all encompassing then.
Yeah, easy, man. So I think my EDC begins with my knife. I think that's probably the most important thing you can have on you. I have a zero tolerance 0620, which unfortunately is discontinued. So I made sure to snag a couple of extra of those before while you could still find them. I carry a flashlight, a Phoenix LD02, I think. It's just a little single AAA flashlight. It's not a super tactical model or anything like that. My car keys, my iPhone, and my wallet. And then in my coat pocket, I always have a can of pepper spray. And on my in my belt, I'm not going to say always. I typically have a handgun there. Currently, I'm carrying a compact 1911, but that's kind of conditional based on if I can carry where I'm going, or if I'm flying, or what.
Right. Yeah, for me, I think it's almost the same. Mine always starts with a knife, and I'm almost at a toss up between a knife and a wallet. But I know your reasons and mine are pretty much the same. If you had to drop me somewhere and I could only pick one thing, I'd be like, all right, give me a knife. And for me, it's a zero tolerance 5.62 CP. I think it's CP or CF. But before that, I used to carry a Benchmade Triage, which I still really like that knife, and find that in some ways it's probably a more practical knife for what I'm looking for, but not a great knife for self-defense purposes. And then from there, it's phone, wallet, and I like to make this distinction: wallet with lots of cash in it, and some small bills and in large bills, and then also so let's see, what was it? Phone, wallet, knife, and then pistol. Sometimes on my and I don't always carry my pistol on my person. I will, if I'm carrying my bag, I will often carry the pistol just in the bag, but the bag is designed for fast access to the weapon. So pretty much really, other than type of knife, identical. Although I don't carry pepper spray. I keep thinking about carrying pepper spray and I don't. So tell us about pepper spray.
Uh, Dude, I love pepper spray. I've never sprayed anyone with it, but I have been sprayed with pepper spray, and I've completely ignored it, like most of the self defense community, until just a few months ago. And I decided to buy a couple cans of it for me and my girlfriend. And I started looking at, I assumed it was kind of like a firearm in the places you could and couldn't take pepper spray. But dude, you can take pepper spray almost anywhere. And, I think about, I'm very reluctant to think about using my firearm in self-defense, because even if you're completely legally justified, you still may have to defend your actions in court. And, George Zimmerman's the example that gets trotted out a lot, especially by, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andrew Branca, who wrote the Law of Self-Defense book.
Oh, yeah,
I attended one of his classes, and he said, Zimmerman's final legal bill, which a lot of it was, pro bono work done by his attorneys, but the final bill would have cost him $1.7 million. And he also pointed out that had he had pepper spray on him, that would have been a non-event. He would have called 911. That would have been, at very worst, that would have been a simple assault charge, and that probably would have solved the issue right there. So I'm a massively big fan of pepper spray because I can take it almost anywhere.
Yeah, I think you just made a big case for it. I think I've just heard mixed results on how effective it is, but I guess that's always, go for pepper spray first, and if that doesn't succeed, move on to more extreme measures.
Well, my co-host on Rich, my co-host on the podcast, spent years working as a bouncer in clubs. He was a cop. He's pepper sprayed literally dozens of people and said never once has it not worked. And it said when he was a cop and other cops would bring someone in and be like, yeah, pepper spray didn't work. You'd always look and see it, like, because it's always dyed like bright red or whatever. He said he would look and this guy would have like a streak of red on his neck or something. And I think it really depends on you getting it in the right place.
Yeah, it's like a gun. You have to aim for the right parts.
Yeah. It's not just a point in the general direction. You actually have to make a solid hit with it, I think.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because I mean its main point is eyes and mouth. So, and if you eyes, mouth, and nose, and if you don't get it in the face, then just spraying somebody across the chest or neck isn't or like one officer I know where he accidentally sprayed his partner. Or his partner sprayed him. I can't remember which one it was, but that tends to not be effective.
Yeah, and I'm not being glib. I am certain there are cases where it has not worked. I think the overwhelming majority of the time, when you get it in the right place, it will get the job done.
Yeah, I think you've just convinced me that I need to start carrying some in addition. So let's move on to bag. So you've talked about you've gone back and forth between a backpack and a messenger bag, and like all of us, I feel like the contents of my bag are constantly evolving, and part of that is based on some just personal rules that you and I have similar rules about. But let's get into, what do you find is important that you have in your bag? I know you broke it down a little bit, but like, let's go over like what you feel is important, and maybe even what you've actually removed from your bag while you've gone through this process.
Okay, so, oh boy, you're about to coin the term, which I've noticed listening to your podcast. Almost every guest says this at some point. You're about to make me go down the rabbit hole.
It's all a devious trick.
Yeah, so I think probably one of the single most important things you can have in an EDC bag are the things that will equip you to deal with really common emergencies that are massively more likely to occur than the zombie platypus apocalypse, or I don't know, pick your poison. For me, the single most important thing in there is my little admin module, which is basically a backup wallet. And I have two backup forms of ID. I have a passport and my passport card in there. I have, since listening to your episode with Joshua Sheets, I have upped my amount of cash to $1,000 in there in cash, mostly in big bills, just in the interest of saving space, but also 20s, 10s, 5s, and 1s. And as well as, I think, about $10 in coins, and backup keys to my house, my car, and a couple of other things like I have locks on my gun cases and things like that. So if I'm locked out of my house, I really don't walk out of this house without my bag on me. If I walk out of the house and the door closes behind me, I've got keys to get back into the house, or I can just take my spare key and start my car or whatever. I think that is really, really important, as well as in addition to cash, like Joshua was saying, access to money. I have backups of my ATM card. I don't use debit cards. I have an actual ATM card that only works for ATM transactions, and backups of my credit cards. And, you know, like, I hate to keep hammering this point home, but that was such a good episode. There's not a lot of problems that $1,000 won't solve for you. And just having access to money, I think is, you know, to his point, probably one of the biggest overlooked things in the prepping community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And I've always thought of money as an omni tool. And I think I may have even said it in that episode too, that it is a tool that can be turned into anything else that you need. And barring some truly extreme situations, cash can be turned into anything else pretty quickly. It would have to be truly insane for cash to not be working.
I hear that argument sometimes, like, oh, when society collapses, money is not going to, you know, you can't eat money, or you can't eat gold or whatever. And that's true. But there's about 50 steps between where we are right now and a complete collapse where money is only good to start fires or whatever. And in 49 of those steps, money is a really, really good thing to have.
Yeah. Well, I would even add a little bit to that. 50 steps and about 3 weeks to 3 months before money is just like no longer of any use at all.
Right.
Yeah. That's pretty good. So what else we got in there?
You know, that's my backup wallet, my admin stuff. And I've kind of built this bag as if I had to run out of the house naked in the middle of the night, I could clothe myself. I could, you know, replenish my pocket items. You know, I've got an extra knife, extra flashlight, extra keys, that sort of stuff. I think the next biggest thing for me is, and probably most frequently used, is my electronics bag. My computer, I have a backup computer cable in there. I have cables to charge my phone, a pre-charged battery for my phone. I have a 12-volt adapter for my phone, every way in the world to charge my phone. Because again, I think this is an incredibly overlooked survival item. Yes, if we have an EMP, it won't be any good. But anything short of that, even if we don't have cell service, I still have downloadable maps on my phone. I still have the ability to use that as a flashlight. It will still function as a compass. An incredible capability, and the ability to keep it charged under any circumstances that are remotely within reason, I think is really freaking important.
Mm-hmm. I would 100% agree with you on that.
First aid kit is probably my next thing, and this does not get used very often. I do have some boo-boo kit items in there with Band-Aids and like single-serve packets of Neosporin and some single-serve packets of over-the-counter medications, and those get used occasionally. I have a decent amount of medical training, and I listened to an episode of yours yesterday, Common Sense, what was it?
The no BS for emergency medicine. Yeah.
And I really liked what that guest said about like basically having the equipment to match your level of capability. And most of my stuff is just a tourniquet, a bunch of trauma dressings, 4x4s and combine dressings, and Kerlix gauze and stuff like that. You know, again, with a handful of clinical things. I think I'm probably far more likely to need that than I ever will a handgun.
Mm-hmm. That's hope. Yeah.
I think everyone should have a first aid kit of some sort.
Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways, mine's pretty similar is very similar to yours. I think there's one thing that I know you and I don't share, and we'll come to that in a second. But for me, it's pretty much the same. It's a small first aid kit, and that includes, you know, all the stuff that you just named, including like nitrile gloves. And the only extra thing that I carry in there that I don't think you do is I put one of the emergency Mylar bags in there, and that's just for being able to maintain body temperature or shock or anything like that. And they're so small that, you know, why not? I do the same thing, an emergency cash and credit card in my bag, in addition to what's already in my wallet. And even an extra set of small bills, because for some reason there's always something where it takes ones and I'm out of ones. So I always kind of end up replenishing my pocket out of there. A flashlight. I also carry a Leatherman Raptor, which is as much a self-rescue tool as it is. They're basically, it's Leatherman's upgraded answer to the medical shears for cutting away clothing and stuff like that. But it also has a rescue hook and glass breaker on it. And then I carry a Leatherman Wave. Same stuff, everything that I need to be able to support my phone, because they are so critical as a communication device, as an information storage device. And like you said, if it's an EMP, okay, fine. But in all other likely scenarios, a phone is the thing that I'm going to need the most. One other thing that I carry that I don't think I've ever really seen anyone else carry is I use the Ride in the Rain 3x5 spiral bound notepad. And on the inside cover, I've written down my ID number, my health insurance information, primary care physician, wife's name and telephone number. And then on the first page, I've turned the first page of that into a telephone directory of the 15 most important numbers that I may ever need. And then the relationship next to them in case I'm incapacitated and somebody finds it. And I have a note on the front of the thing that, what is it? The ECN or whatever it is, whatever the acronym that notates to emergency responders. If they see that acronym, they know, oh, this is meant for me to look at. And I found that to be a really important thing. And not that I've ever had to reference any of that, but if something happens to my address book or anything else, at least I have an offline copy of what I feel to be my most important numbers and my most important personally identification information. Other than that, like a lighter, and I'll save this one for last and I'll skip ahead. So other than that, a pen, a pistol and extra magazine, hearing protection, and a spare set of keys. Now, then I also carry lockpicks, but you and I can talk about lockpicks. The hearing protection I carry just because I have been in several situations where it's like I'm having to sit around and wait for something, and I want to read a book or I want to do something else, and I don't want to sit around and listen to everyone else chatter. In addition to it being really nice if I get to the range and the batteries are dead in my hearing protection or whatever, I've got that with me. So it is actually something that I do find that I use often. But so the lockpicks, I carry them and you don't. For me, I carry the Bogata. I'm pretty sure I'm not saying that right. But I'll put it in the show notes. The titanium tiny little lockpicks. And I find that at least once every 6 months, there's something where there's a padlock or a garage door lock or something weird where I'm somewhere and it's like, yeah, I could probably fashion some picks and get into this quickly, but these are small enough, light enough, and just kind of forgettable enough, I guess, that I don't worry about officers finding them or something. I also just don't do things that tend to attract attention by officers. So for me, that's why I have found them useful. But now I understand you don't carry lockpicks in your stuff, even though you have a tremendous amount of training in that area.
I do. I have basically 5 years of training and experience in doing that. And I recently took my kit out because my very basic kit is pretty freaking hefty. It's it's basically the little leather zippered wallet that you would buy like one of these, I don't know, 47-piece sets in or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I threw almost every single one of those things out. And I built a lot of the tools that are in there and have some very specialized tools for some certain things. And that's in my brain. That's kind of like my minimum. This is what I need, but it's still a pretty big kit. Maybe I need to reassess that and put just a couple key things. I find that if I'm actually going to have to pick a lock, basically one tension tool, and I have one that I really like, a tension tool and a curved pick, and maybe a what's the little half diamond pick.
Oh yeah,
that will do 90% of the things that I need to do with lock picks. I should reassess that, but yeah, I recently took that kit out. I do have some dedicated survival only stuff that will never get used on a day-to-day basis. But if it is going to be a thing that does not get used on a daily basis or has no utility, just in the course of normal activity, it has to be small and unobtrusive enough to to not impose a huge weight or size penalty. I do have a fire starter. I'm a big fan of the Sparklight. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I'll have to check that one out.
I have some water purification tablets. Like I said, I have. I also have and this is not a strictly survival item. I have a Leatherman multi-tool or a Gerber multi-tool in there. I have a little emergency repair kit with a little thing of duct tape I made and a couple zip ties and a little bit of 550 cord. And those things are so small and light and take up so little space. I really don't have a problem carrying those. I think where I get into being kind of turned off with dedicated emergency equipment is when somebody's carrying like a broken down AR-15 in their backpack because it's huge, it's heavy. There's no other use for that. It really restricts where you can take. Do I use it often? If yes, leave it in there. If no, does it have disproportionate size weight penalty? If yes, it's out. If no, then maybe I'll put it in. And, water purification tablets, perfect example of that. They're super, super tiny. They weigh almost nothing. They can fit almost anywhere. Is there a multi-purpose item I can replace like 3 other things with? Or can I modify something to be like survival related? So I've talked about this on the show, but I think it's a perfect example of just picking my water bottles. I do have 2 water bottle slots in my pack, and I keep those both loaded with a 32-ounce water bottle. And I could have gone with a Nalgene or whatever the plastic water bottle, but I think you lose some capability there. So I went with single-walled stainless steel, so I can boil water in that if I have to. It's not any bigger. It's not a dedicated item. It's 32 ounces, so it works with all water purification tablets. The threads will fit all major water purification systems. And it's just a very, very minor change that gives me an enormously bigger capability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that was one thing I forgot to mention is that I do also, everywhere I go, I've got at least 32 ounces of water with me. That's a good point, though, about the metal one, because I know I carry a metal Nalgene in my car kit, but I've not stopped and thought about actually carrying one with my person, since I do carry a water bottle constantly. One problem I've run into is, since I have packed it all the way down to an 11-liter bag, so it's really small, it has no kind of side hooks or anywhere for a water bottle. So I always find I'm having to drag it around by hand. Or if I stop and do something, then I tend to just leave it in my truck. But then usually my truck is within 25, 75 yards of me. And so I don't think I'm going to need water in that big of a hurry, or something's going to take my car away. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think that's an excellent point. And I think that's one thing that in general, people tend not to drink enough water, and they walk around dehydrated as it is. So it's just a good habit to get into. Plus it's water. It's a top priority.
And that's the thing that I'm kind of anal about. Before I leave work every day, if I'm in the office, I always make sure my water bottles are full before I hit the road. I make sure they're full before I leave in the morning, wherever I'm going. 64 ounces of water will go a pretty long way for me. And I've kind of turned into a perpetual hydrator. You're on a very, very short timeline without water.
Mm-hmm. That is extremely true. So what are, I think you mentioned, and you and I have a running gag about gas masks, and while I think gas masks are interesting, and they may even be interesting for something like a blackout kit, but as far as an EDC kit, they're not so great. And I think another problem is, one thing, and this has just become one of my pet peeves, one of the things about gas masks in general is that there are so many types of gas masks, and they are so specialized. And then the other problem is, most of us got these beards nowadays, and your gas mask is useless if you have a beard. So,
yeah, I haven't been clean shaven in over 10 years now, almost 11 years now. So, yeah, I'm probably not going to be getting a gas mask on. Even if like you said, there's multiple types. And what are you preparing for? What's the intended purpose of this gas mask? If it's for like tear gas, you're going to be fine. Like that gas mask will do something for you. If it's for the Russians dropping nerve agents on us, you have to protect your entire body. And that's a very short-term solution. That's basically until you can get to a non-contaminated area and all that. I have a kind of fatalistic view of any kind of like chemical munition. It's probably going to get you, and don't be super uncomfortable in the meantime, I guess.
You're super cheery. What are some of your pet peeves as far as what you see that people drag around with them needlessly?
So actually I got sucked way into this morning. I'm like, what are some ridiculous things that people put in bug out bags? And I just Googled EDC bag dump or bug out bag dump. And oh my God, man, photo after photo after photo. So I think there's a lot of, for actual EDC bags, I see a lot of camping gear, a lot of sleeping bags, tents, jet boils, that sort of thing. Don't get me wrong. If I broke down on the side of the road, like if the 5 was shut down for 2 days and I had to be out there, it would be awesome to have a sleeping bag and just go to sleep in my car. But it's probably not very likely that that's going to happen. I do keep a couple blankets in my car, but if there's a tent in my bag, I'm not sure where people think they're going to set that tent up. Like I get it. There is some application for having that, some sort of emergency kit, but what I carry back and forth day to day, that probably doesn't make the cut for me.
Right. And I think maybe that's it too. Like people don't make distinctions and building out systems of support as far as having different bags for different things. So like my EDC kit, like I said, it's an 11-liter bag. I've intentionally forced myself so that other than the tools I've talked about, like all I can do is throw a laptop and a hoodie in there, and that's it, so that I don't drag around all this other stuff. And then the things like I talked about, like there is a metal Nalgene bottle, and then there is a much more extensive kit that just stays in my truck under a back seat. And I think maybe that's where people kind of miss it. Like, hey, you got this vehicle. You can store stuff under a seat in there or whatever, a separate kit. You don't have to drag some of that stuff around with you. But yeah, and then some of the items, it's like a tent. Like, you're going to pull over to the side of the road and throw up a tent? So, yeah.
I don't get a lot of the like specific camping type gear. And to be clear, like I do view my EDC bag kind of as my bug out bag. If I had to, like I say, the example I always use, if I had to run out of the house naked in the middle of the night, I would grab that and try to grab my shoes because I could completely clothe myself, replace my wallet, my normal EDC items, with the exception of my firearm, which hopefully and my phone, which if I could grab those things, great. If not, I'm sure I could replace them later. But my bag is a little bit bigger, and like in the environment I work in, it doesn't really stand out all that much. It doesn't really look weird for someone to carry. I don't know. It's like what's the 3-day assault pack type? Is it like 30 liter?
I think it's 30 liters. Yeah. 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 liters. Yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So about that size. And, I'm going to put this to the test. My girlfriend and I are going to Ireland and Iceland for almost 2 weeks, like 11 or 12 days, coming up in January. And both of us are taking nothing but our EDC bag and the clothes on our back. And we're really going to test this strategy out. And, getting back to like my common emergency, my most likely emergency, I may have to evacuate my area. I'm probably going to drive to my parents' house or a friend's house that lives like 2 states over. And just having a change of clothes, some basic toiletries, those are probably, and money, those are probably the things I'm actually going to need in that event. If it's an event where I need a rifle and magazine and a chest rig and a melee weapon, then probably I'd be screwed. But the likelihood of that happening is very, very low unless I could come home and get my melee weapon.
Well, your tactical tomahawk, you that should go with you everywhere you go, man. I have a thing about tactical tomahawk, personal pet peeve about but anyway, I'm not going to go down there. Yeah. And I think that's one thing is, and I think that's a mindset shift too. A lot of people start looking at, I view the weapon that I carry with me every day as something that I can use to break contact, something that it's just get the hell away from me while I get the hell away from you. Whereas I see rifles and things like that as a much more serious defensive weapon and something. And I think my other thing too is when I was younger, sure, I had, would thought like if somebody had asked me if there's an active shooter situation, are you going to engage with it? I'm like, Probably not. As the older I get, the more I'm like, no, my top number one priority is to my wife, and therefore my top number one priority is not doing things that are going to get me injured and keep me from getting home to my wife. So, but I think that's just a mental shift that happens for some people. Some people it doesn't.
I agree. Let me sidetrack for just a second, if I may.
It is the rabbit hole. Sidetrack away.
About 3 weeks ago, we were sitting here on the couch, and I live in a densely populated area with a lot of, I'm going to say, like 10-story-ish buildings around. So sounds can kind of get distorted and whatever. And we just hear this really weird roar outside. Like, what the hell is that? What the hell's going on? So I opened the door, poked my head out on the balcony. I'm like, I still don't know. So we live on the ground floor. I walked outside and I was like, holy shit, that's rifle fire. So I ran back in. I had my pistol on me, but I grabbed my 3 magazines out of my EDC bag. And I was like, man, I've always said I would never get involved with this, but like, I can't sit here with potentially people being hurt or killed and just with a clean conscience, just sit here and do nothing. And I ran out the door, and it wasn't until like I was 50 yards out that I noticed my girlfriend was right behind me. And we got like maybe another 50 yards, and I could see it was like a big fireworks display for this grand opening of a restaurant. But I was like, holy crap, man, what the hell am I doing? What's going on right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways I've worried that I would make that choice too. And override my personal set of priorities as far as who I'm getting home to and who I'm willing to step into the fray for and who I'm not. So and I think that's one of those interesting things. You don't know what you're going to do truly until you get into that moment, as you yourself discovered 50 yards away from your apartment.
Right. And any number of like getting involved in something like that, any number of bad things can happen, right? Like I thought a lot about that since, like, what was I doing? What was going through my head?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that speaks a lot to a mentality to think about as far as when people are thinking through their EDC or any of these kits is what is realistic and what are your personal priorities? Like what would be the right way for you to respond to these things based on what you've got going on in your life or where your priorities lie, period. And I think to kind of backstep a little bit and go into, you've touched on it a bunch of times, something that you've got to touch all the time. For me, the rule that I've come up with is whatever's in my bag is something that I have to have used within the last 6 months, excluding my pistol, because hopefully I've not used that in the last 6 months. But excluding that, everything else in there has got to be something that I use on a regular basis. What do you use? Do you use a more defined criteria, or is it really just like you look at it on occasion and go, okay, you know what, I haven't used this in forever. It needs to come out.
No, I think I've gotten this pretty down now. The things that are in there that don't get used they're kind of small enough, light enough, unobtrusive enough, and don't need to be replaced all the time or maintained all the time. They're just kind of fire and forget, throw them in there and don't worry about it. I think I'm pretty solid with those. With the exception of the first aid kit, it's kind of big and bulky, and it just kind of is. So I kind of accept that that's right on top. It's the first thing you see when you open the bag, and to get to anything else, you have to move it. Probably the other thing that doesn't get used a lot is the change. A ton is the change of clothing, which, like I say, sometimes comes out. And I do change those clothes out occasionally. And honestly, man, I think I'm at a pretty, I hate to keep using this word, pretty refined point in what's in my bag.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, very cool. Now, y'all did also your own discussion on your show, and actually y'all are doing y'all have done a whole series on your show, Across the Peak, and we've hinted at it a few times. So tell us about this new show. What are you doing over there? Because you were the privacy and security for a while, and I know you've branched out and now started doing this new thing. Tell us about it, please.
Yeah, so I've tended to follow the advice that's given to all podcasts and bloggers of specialize, find a very, very small niche and be the guy for that thing. And what I realized very quickly with the privacy thing is, as much as I love it, I still do. I'm still very, very into it. The other thing I started was the Revolver Guy blog. I love revolvers. I'm still very into them, but only being able to write or talk or podcast about one thing all the time gets really, really tedious and, quite frankly, just kind of boring, and you feel boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
And Across the Peak is my antidote to that. It's basically our show where we give ourselves license to talk about absolutely anything, but primarily it's capable human skills like how to change a tire, which I'm very disappointed that is one of our least popular episodes, but also one that people probably need the most. But we talk about EDC stuff. We talk a little bit about firearms. We talk about coffee and how to build a cocktail. And we have all these. We interviewed Todd Orr, who survived 2 grizzly attacks back to back.
Holy shit!
Yeah. So it's a little bit of everything. I think the way it frequently gets pegged is as man knowledge, but I think we are pushing this as human knowledge. We want everybody to adopt some of these skills. And to know about some of these things. We're about to have my tattoo artist on to talk about tattoos. We've got some history focused episodes coming up. That's kind of the thrust of Across the Peak.
That's really cool. So it's just like all the stuff your daddy should have taught you.
Yep. There you go, man.
or all the stuff you wish somebody's dad would teach all those damn kids running around these days.
Exactly. Yeah. I think... I think kind of I probably shouldn't say this on the air. I think our avatar for the show was basically people that grew up, went to high school, went to college, and then have spent 5 years working in a white collar job and wake up one day and realize, like, holy shit, I don't know how to jumpstart my car, or I don't know how to do X, Y, or Z. And kind of conversely, the guys that have been in the military for 20 years and have all these awesome tactical skills and medical skills and can pick locks and whatever, but can't cook a meal for themselves or that sort of thing. So trying to create very well-rounded humans in kind of a full spectrum of humanities and hardware stuff and like EDC and whatever. Yeah. If that's a rambling enough explanation.
No, I think that was a great one. And I know I've personally really enjoyed it. So give us the name and what is the website address for the show?
The show is called Across the Peak, and the web address is acrossthepeak.com. And if you're on Instagram, you can follow us on Instagram at Across the Peak. And the Instagram is 100% the work of my girlfriend, and it is amazing. She is awesome.
Well, good stuff, dude. As always, it was so much fun getting to talk to you both before the show and, of course, during the show. And I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Show notes and other tasty resources from this episode can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E282. And hey, please use our links, because if you do, we get a little something extra, and it doesn't cost you anything. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, do all that YouTube stuff. Like this video, subscribe, and slap that bell around because bananas are yellow. With that, we wrap up episode number 282. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.